Hey everyone, this is Finn. In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you about projectiles. Let's go ahead and click New to add a new project. Make sure 3D is the template for your project. Let's rename it How to Use Projectiles, and I'm going to press Create. Alright, let's add a source that these projectiles can be coming from. In this instance, I want to create a cylinder that represents a cannon. So let's right click in our hierarchy, 3D object, and then cylinder. I'd like to color this cylinder by adding a simple material to it. Right now, if you go to your inspector, go down and see that you have a material on this object, but it is the default material. Go over to your project files and right click, hover over create, and then go down to material. It's going to prompt you to rename your material, and I'm going to call it cannon. Now let's click and hold this cannon material and drag it to the cylinder in the hierarchy. Let's click our cylinder game object, and as you can see, we no longer have the default material, we have the cannon material. Let's click on our cannon material again, and we are going to change the color by pressing this white box with an eyedropper tool to the right of it. It's right next to this main maps and then albedo. To the right of albedo, you can click and you can change your color. I am going to create a dark brown cannon. Actually, it's going to be nearly black. It's pretty much black. Yep, that's a black cannon. I am going to make it shinier by increasing the metallic attribute right here. You click on this sliding bar and slide it to the right to make it shinier. Then I'm going to take the smoothness and move it all the way back to 0. There we go. Now that I like the way my cannon looks, I have to position it correctly. Let's click on the cylinder game object. Let's rename it cannon. Press enter. And let's rotate it by the x-axis 45 degrees. Now we have a cannon that's pointed this way, and the direction that we want our projectile to come out of is this direction going forward. And the reason why I'm pulling this green arrow back and forth is because while I do that, I can see what position that is going to affect for the axes. Which coordinate gets increased when I pull this? That is actually going to be y and z. We are going to want to keep that in mind for when we program our projectile. Now, let's create a new object for our cannonball. Right click, press 3D object, and then sphere. We want to position the sphere right at the top of where the cannonball is supposed to come out of. And then I'm going to shrink it by pressing the scale tool up here to the top left, clicking and dragging the middle square there. Now that ball can realistically fit inside that cannon. Now we are going to rotate our sphere, not using the rotate tool actually, but by rotating by the x-axis. We're going to rotate it by 45 degrees. And we will pull this up and down and verify that this direction is the y and z axis. Now I want to push our ball into the cannon by using the move tool. Make sure that you will not be able to see any part of the ball. So now when we project our ball that direction, it'll look like it's coming out of our cannon. Let's rename our sphere Cannonball. And let's also add a rigid body to our cannonball as well by clicking Add Component. And I already have it typed up here, but I'm going to retype it. Type rigid body, and then click rigid body to add it. Now I am going to get rid of my cylinder collider, or excuse me, my capsule collider that is on my cylinder. I'm going to click the three dots to the top right and remove the component. And that's because we do not want our cannon colliding with the ammo inside of it. Now I am going to add a new component to my cannon. I'm going to start typing because we are going to create a new script. So I am going to call this script Projectile. To edit this script, we are going to either click these three dots to open up this little menu for the components. The three dots are at the top right of each component, and then click Edit Script, or you can double click on this script icon right here. It has the sharp symbol to represent a C# script. Now that we have our projectile script open, I am going to show you how to store its rigid body into a variable. Let me show you first how to declare a variable. Let's make sure that we are inside of the public class, which is defined by these two squiggly brackets. Right now, they are the two squiggly brackets that are highlighted. We want to make sure that we are above and not inside the start and update functions. And we are going to type public because we want to be able to set this variable in the inspector, and I'll show you how we're going to do that in a moment. And since this variable is of the data type rigid body, we are then going to type rigid body, and we are going to name our rigid body variable RB and put a semicolon after that. Press Ctrl S and go back to your Unity project. Make sure that you have Cannonball selected. It seems as though I put my script on the wrong game object. I put it on my cannon game object. What we are going to do is we are just going to click these three dots right here. We are going to go to remove component. Easy as that. And now I'm going to show you how to reattach it after the script has already been created to the correct object. Make sure Cannonball is selected, and then click and drag your projectile script down to the inspector and release to add it. Now you can see that our RB variable that's going to store our rigid body, it's showing up in the inspector. It says none rigid body, which means it's looking for a rigid body, but right now there is nothing stored in this variable. So to change that, we are going to click up here, the heading of the rigid body component, click and drag it to that space where it says none rigid body until it's highlighted blue, and then release to add that rigid body component to this rigid body variable. Now, whenever we reference RB in our code, we are going to be talking about the rigid body of the object. Let's create a new function underneath, not inside, of the two start and update functions that already exist. And let's type void fire opening parenthesis, closing parenthesis, and then make sure you open up and close those squiggly brackets. Press enter while the cursor is inside of those squiggly brackets to move them down like this. And it creates a nice looking container. Now we are going to affect the rigid body's velocity by the Y and Z axis, because that is the direction we saw increases up here on our position when we drag it by this green arrow. So I'm going to press Ctrl S to make sure this scene is saved. Go back to my other script, and to reference the rigid body, we first start by typing RB and then dot or period. And now let's say velocity to reference the rigid body's velocity, and we are going to add to that to increase the velocity, and to add to that we press plus and then the equal sign. And now I want you to type new vector 3 and open up and close parentheses and end it with a semicolon. This new vector 3 represents the coordinates that we are going to be increasing our velocity by. So make sure that your cursor is in the center of those two parentheses, the opening and closing. Type 0, that represents the x-axis, and we don't want to increase by that axis, comma, 5, which is how much, actually let's go ahead and do 10. We're going to increase by 10 on the y-axis, and then 10 as well on the z-axis. Let's press Control Save. Control S is what I mean by that. Press Control S to save. And now let's go back to our project, and let's press play to test our scene. Oh, I know what the problem is. We never actually called our function. Let's go back to Visual Studio. As you probably noticed, this is not what we intended to happen. It's just going to drop through. It did not project itself into the air, and that is because of an easy mistake, an easy beginner's mistake. That's why I'm glad I made it. We never actually called to our function. We are going to click our cursor into the start method, and we are going to type fire the same way that we typed it down here, and then opening parenthesis, closing parenthesis, and a semicolon. Now that is going to call to our fire method, which is going to cause it at the very beginning to propel our object in the air by the exact degree that we want it to. Let's press Control S to save. Go back to our Unity scene, and let's press play. There you go. If we wanted to make something more along the lines of a laser, let's say you're having a battle in space and you throw a space cannon through the air to hit an asteroid that's coming towards Earth, something like that. Let's say that we want to get rid of gravity, and so that it is shooting in the same angle for always until it collides with something. We would go down here to our rigid body component for our cannonball, uncheck Use Gravity, and now let's see what happens. Press play. Now our projectile just shoots through the air and it'll never stop until it hits something. Let's turn gravity back on. I'm going to click Cannonball in my hierarchy. I'm going to check Use Gravity, and then I am going to press Control S. But now I'm going to go back into my script, and I'm going to tweak these numbers. I'm going to change the y-axis to 30, and I'm going to change our z-axis to 30 as well. Now our object is going to shoot much farther and much faster into the air. Let's watch. I'll play that again. There you go. Since we increased both by the y-axis, which is the height, and the z-axis, which is how far it got from that to that direction, it got even farther. It traveled even farther and higher than the time before. If I change the z-axis back to 10, or not 100, back to 10, and press Control S to save, you will see that it'll go much higher still, but it won't travel much farther. There you go. It didn't travel that far, it just traveled pretty high. And that's your introduction to projectiles. I hope you learned a lot. Have a wonderful day.